Have the basic idea about this German school of diffusionism, a little bit of idea है ना थोड़ा सा. What is it? That cultural traits diffuse like ripples in the water. ठीक है. So जैसे कि ripples move करते हैं वैसे ही cultural traits spread करते हैं. That is what the idea of your diffusion. Now diffusion का जो इनका आइडिया था, दिस इज यू कैन से जर्मन डिफ्यूजनिस्ट, जर्मन स्कूल ऑफ डिफ्यूजनिज्म. दिस स्कूल वाज मैथडोलॉजिकली superior to its British counterparts. This was methodologically superior to its British counterparts. उनका मेथड इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग, इतना रेप्लिकेबल नहीं था जितना कि इनका था, राइट. सो इनको ने किया क्या था, एंड हु आर द मेन स्कॉलर्स हु वर देयर इन दिस स्कूल. सो वी हैव 4 scholars. One was the Frederick Ratzel. Second was Leo Frobenius. Third, Fritz Grabner. 4, Wilhelm Schmidt. These are the 4 main scholars that are associated with this school. Okay. Now let's talk about them one by one, because ultimately it is their ideas that we will compile in this school, that is also known as culture circle school, culture district school, or culture crease school. और कल्चर सर्कल और कल्चर डिस्ट्रिक्ट स्कूल. ठीक है, अलग अलग नाम है इसके. सो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद वन बाय वन हु ऑल आर दीज. फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट, Ratzel. Ratzel was a geographer, a zoologist turned geographer. A zoologist turned geographer who wrote a famous book, Anthropology. Yes. Anthropology. Right. In this book, he basically differentiated between the territorial geography and the human geography. He said that human geography is anthropology. He considered human geography as anthropology. कि ये anthropology ही है. ठीक है? Human geography is anthropology. That is why somebody asked me कि what is the significance of anthropology in GS. सो आई से पेपर 1 में सबसे पहले हिस्ट्री आता है, वहां पे प्री हिस्ट्री एंथ्रोपोलॉजी है, सोसाइटी पूरी एंथ्रोपोलॉजी है, और ज्योग्राफी वाला जो पोर्शन है, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली यू आर स्टडीइंग इट फ्रॉम द रेफरेंस पॉइंट ऑफ मैन, राइट, except the geological side, everything is anthropology. Whatever you are studying, everything is basically in concern of this being. Whatever you are studying ethics because it is concerning us. You are studying polity because it is concerning us. So everything is anthropology. Whatever is there, polity पूरी anthropology है ना? From that point of view, so everything is anthropology. You just have to develop the eyes to look what is anthropology. Are you convinced here? Everything is anthropology. यही पढ़ाया गया होगा आपको, है ना? Okay. So what Redgel says, Redgel believe that people are influenced by physical environment. People are influenced by physical environment. That means, simply he's saying that if there is coastline, so naturally those people will have canoes. ओशियन के पास रहने वाले लोगों के पास कैनो होगा, and their subsistence mainly depend on fishing, right? तो होगा. But he further qualifies his statement. He says, but people are more influenced from each other than the environment. People are influenced more from each other than the environment. He says that people like to borrow from each other. Like to borrow from each other. ठीक है? Borrow means whatever is with you. Suppose you know the art of canoe making, so I want to take it from you. Right? Suppose why Indian school teachers are sent to another country to just go and check what kind of schooling they are doing. जाते हैं ना exchange programs में. क्यों जाते हैं? ताकि सीख के आओ वहां पे क्या हो रहा है, so that whatever good things are there we can implement here. यही करते हैं. So basically borrow करना चाहते हैं. People are more interested in borrowing from each other rather than inventing them. Right? He says individual cultural traits or the entire cultural complex individual cultural traits or the entire cultural complex may be transplanted through migration, right? Migration, or you can simply say diffusion. Since he is emphasizing more on the idea of migration, that is why sometime the German school is also known as migrationist school. right? Because they are emphasizing too much on migration. That is why they are also sometimes known as migrationist. ठीक है कि लोग ही migrate कर रहे हैं. And when they are going, suppose I am going somewhere, so whatever I know from my learnings, I will try to showcase them. I will try to tell the people, right? You may say that my clothing may be observed by others, right? My way of speaking may be taken up by someone, isn't it? So that is how. Okay. Then what he says, that the cultural traits make their own adaptation. Cultural traits make their own adaptation in course of diffusion. In course of diffusion, they make their own adaptation. That means cultural traits may degenerate or may elaborate. ठीक है? So that means what? Cultural traits may degenerate, or you may say dilute, or elaborate. अगर उस कल्चर में जरूरत ही नहीं है उस पर्टिकुलर ट्रेड की तो क्या करेंगे, वो डिजेनरेट कर जाएगा. ज्यादा जरूरत पड़ रही है तो वो इलेबोरेट हो जाएगा. Is it clear? And this idea that he's talking about here, it shows the influence of Darwin's idea of adaptive radiation. Right? This shows the influence of Darwin's idea of adaptive radiation. How many of you do not know the idea of adaptive radiation? Okay. Right now we have too many species, too many types of species. सभी को पता है, right? How come they came into existence? Through हम ब्लू ग्रीन एल्गे, व्हाट शी सेज, आर्क बैक्टीरिया से इतने सारी लाइफ की फॉर्म्स बन गई. कैसे बने वो? Let's take another example. Let's take the example of primate ancestor. You know primates? Our ancestor, we are primates. Primate is an order in animal kingdom, right? We are primates, and we are in the same order as we are with the apes, monkeys, right? ये सारे same primate order में आते हैं. Okay? Now we have different features, but we walk on two legs, whereas apes walk on the four legs. Monkeys also walk on the four legs, right? Sometimes they also just cling and jump from one branch to the another. Monkeys have tail, but apes don't have tail. We are also great apes, right? A little bit refined, more evolved ape, but we are also apes, right? Okay. Then if you go a little bit back in time, so we have other species, right? They are also you can say sharing the same order, but they are different. Why they are different? Why monkeys are different than us? Why monkeys differ from us? why those changes occurred? Environment may put pressure that what is needed and what is not needed, right? So environmental pressure might have resulted in us becoming biped. Environmental pressure, if you just see the gibbons, let me show you. Maybe I must be having a video here. देखा है आप लोगों ने? कैसे जाएंगे उस पे? अच्छा, where is this primate? Can someone call this guy? कहाँ जा रहे हो? हैं तुम प्राइमेट बन के दिखा रहे हो? उछल कूद शुरू कर दी तुमने, हैं? See, this is showing primate radiation. This diagram is showing primate radiation. That how we diverged from the common ancestor into different kind of species, right? There is lorises, lemurs, tarsiers, new world monkey, old world monkey. You see this new world monkey. There's a unique feature here that this is hanging by the tail. So they have prehensile tail. Okay, this old world monkey, our monkey, जो अपने यहाँ वाला monkey है, उसकी पूंछ में इतना दम नहीं है, right? वो he cannot hang with the tail. So there are differences. So this is adapted in a unique environmental condition. This is adapted in a unique environmental condition, and this guy, gibbon, it does not have a tail. So apes differ from monkeys by the absence of tail, right? You can see others. Now there are other differences. If you see these apes who basically are arboreal in nature. Arboreal means they dwell on the trees. So tree life basically demand something different, some different features, right? Since there may be some changes in the climate that forced us to walk on the land, and that might have resulted into origin of a biped. There must have been some changes that for tree life was not suitable to us. So environment put a pressure. So because of the environmental pressure, we adapt to a different environmental condition. And when we adapt to a different environmental condition, we develop specific features. When we develop these specific features to that specific environment, we radiated in a different direction. That is adaptive radiation. समझ रहे हो? Origin of new varieties, new species because of adaptation to a unique environmental condition is called as adaptive radiation. You can have fun a little bit. Let me show. Have you seen Samar? Samar means that gibbon. See how lemurs are adapted. See, this is the unique way of locomotion of lemurs. Lemurs walk like this, right? This is their locomotory mechanism that we call vertical clinging. They cling like this and then they leap. So vertical clinging and leaping. Just have a look. This must be there. क्यों रुक गया? There was a video.
Madagascar is home to the world's population of lemurs.
10 meters.
When trees are too far apart to be reached in a leap, they have to come down to earth. Here, the open ground has shaped a very different set of movements. The forest floor transforms these agile athletes into the filiales of leaves.
म्यूजिक भी कितना अच्छा डाला हुआ है. शाहरुख खान आ रहा है. राइट, ऐसा लग रहा है ना बैग लेके भाग रहा है शाहरुख खान. ओके.
But there's a simple explanation for these frenetic moves. It's all down to body shape.
Okay, so basically because of the environmental pressure they developed this kind of features, and they develop in a unique species, or a unique order may be developed like this, right? So this is what we have to understand here, right? So एक ancestor से अलग अलग varieties का निकल जाना, that is what radiation is. When we are talking about primates, so we say primate radiation, or you say primate adaptive radiation. Clear? Okay, so he says that cultural traits make their own adaptation in course of diffusion. Now, how to study that? How to understand that a cultural trait is borrowed or it is not borrowed? How you know that this cultural trait was borrowed? So he provides an explanation to this. Right. So he says that all cultural traits, all similar cultural traits do not show historical connection. I believe I made myself very clear what we mean by historical connection. That in course of history it was borrowed or influenced by someone, right? As all similar cultural traits do not show historical connection, right? That means we need to discriminate with the functionality, right? All similar cultural traits do not show historical connection. Some cultural traits may be similar because of the functional necessity, because of the functional necessity. Now, what do we mean by this functional necessity? For example, arrows everywhere will have a point. Arrows everywhere will have a point, right? Canoe paddle will have a blade. राइट, कैनो पैडल का मतलब जो आपको जानते हो दैट दिस इज अ काइंड ऑफ, राफ्टिंग किया होगा आपने, तो राफ्टिंग में ऐसा सा एक होता है. सो दिस पैडल एवरीवेयर it will have this blade. This is the blade, right? Because without that you cannot displace water and can move your raft ahead, right? So presence of this blade, right? This does not show the historical connection because it is a functional necessity, right? If you say this is an arrow, so arrow always will have a point, right? Everywhere arrows will have a point because otherwise it will not pierce. ठीक है? So ये नहीं दिखाता है. What can show historical connection then? Historical connection should be seen through non-functional lens. Non-functional lens. For example, lotus flower in Mongolia. Lotus flower in Mongolia, right? See, lotus flower is the representative of their culture. It has a very important value in their culture, in their religion, right? But lotus flower is not a native of Mongolia. It's not a native of Mongolia. It is a native of India. So lotus flower was diffused from India to Mongolia in course of history, right? That shows diffusion. Is it clear? Lotus flower was borrowed in course of history. Similarly, the similarity in the design of bow and arrow, similarity in the design of bow and arrow in Africa and Indonesia also shows historical connection. Also shows historical connection. Now, ऊपर मैंने मना कर दिया लास्ट स्लाइड में कि एरो तो सब जगह सेम होगा. So what kind of similarities we are talking about in the design? Ornamental things, right? How the shaft is made. What kind of ornamentations are there on the shaft? What kind of string fastening is there? String fastening तो कैसे भी हो सकती है, but एक unique string fastening was there in both cultures, right? The feathering of arrows. See, arrow is a part. This point must be there, but pink color का feather ही लगाना है. ये कहाँ लिखा है, right? So this shows this part, which is non-functional part, feathering, right? And a unique feathering is found in two cultures. That shows the historical connection. Clear? Okay. This is the idea of our red gel. Red gel influenced Frobenius and Grabner. Redgel influenced Frobenius and Grabner. Leo Frobenius now. Leo Frobenius. Leo Frobenius was a German anthropologist who worked in museum as a curator one thing we have missed in red gel, right? That was the criteria of form. So we'll लिख लेना, right? He had give the idea of criteria of form. I believe we have explained that in the last session. कल बताया था मैंने आपको what do you mean by criteria of form? You understand what is criteria of form? No? कल की इवनिंग की क्लास में जब लास्ट में जब बात करके गया था सुना नहीं किसी ने? What is it then? नहीं सुना? अच्छा उस टाइम दिमाग बंद हो जाता है लास्ट में जाने कि अब तो कॉपी बंद हो गई है. किसी ने सुना था? हाँ हाँ I have to explain, रुको. See, criteria of form it is a method used by him to understand the historical connection or you may say diffusion ठीक है कैसे what is criteria of form that means if the form of the bow and arrow is same between Africa and Indonesia that shows the historical connection, right? If the same flower is found in say India and Mongolia right that shows so similarity in this form किस फॉर्म में इसको यूज किया जा रहा है right this is the criteria of form so criteria of form can be applied to understand the historical connections right okay वापस आ जाते हैं लियो फ्रोबिनियस पे so लियो फ्रोबिनियस worked in museum as a curator. Frobenius studied masks and secret societies. मास्क आजकल फेस मास्क बहुत चले थे थोड़े दिन पहले वही वाले मास्क और मास्क अभी बैन कर दिए स्विट्जरलैंड ने राइट स्विट्जरलैंड ने अभी किया है ना हिजाब बैन और ये सब स्विट्जरलैंड अभी कल ही हुआ है फ्रांस का तो पहले हो गया था. हाँ. So the same day India gave 1/3 reservation to women and they banned it. Right? So yes, secular places and sacred places, these are two different things. Okay. So in 1898, Frobenius wrote West African Culture Circle, West African Culture Circle, wherein he argued that African cultures have no common origin, comma, different cultures were derived from different cultures. Frobenius rejected evolutionary scheme. Frobenius rejected evolutionary scheme as it is oversimplified according to him. Simple technology does not mean simple society. Okay, next point. Frobenius considered migration as a very important factor in explaining cultural similarities and historical connection. Cultural similarities and historical connections. He emphasized, next point, he emphasized on both material and non-material aspects while studying diffusion. While studying diffusion, he saw, next point, he saw similarities between the myths, jute kind of myths, mythical stories in a sense, right? Myths of Indonesia and Africa. Right? According to him, African myths were derived from Indonesia. African myths were derived from Indonesia. ठीक है? Because in Indonesia these myths occur in the form of epics. These myths occur in the form of epics, whereas in Africa as single stories. Right? So what happened according to him? These epics चले तो epics थे, but वहां जाते जाते degenerate कर गए. Can you see the degeneration here? Can you see the degeneration? So he was a degenerationist in this sense. Is it clear? He saw that Indonesian culture is the high culture. Do right, next line. According to him, Indonesian culture is the high culture and African culture is the low culture. High cultures are originators, whereas low cultures are imitators. Low cultures are imitators. High cultures are originators and low cultures are imitators. ठीक है? Next. Next is Grabner. Fritz ग्रेबनर. हाँ, एक और चीज इसमें भी लिख लेते हैं, थोड़ा सा और ऐड कर लेते हैं इसमें, बिकॉज ये ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें हो जाएंगी. द मैथोडोलॉजी दैट ही एम्प्लॉयड, क्राइटेरिया ऑफ फॉर्म वाज देयर फ्रॉम Redgel. He added another dimension. He added another dimension to the criteria of form of Redgel, that is geographical statistics. He added another dimension to the criteria of form of Redgel, that is geographical statistics, that shows number of similarities and differences between two cultures. Right? Number of similarities between two cultures. Number of similarities in the sense, say similarity in the myths, that is similarity number 1. Similarity number 2 may be similarity in the mask forms. Similarity number 3 may be in the form of drums. Similarity number 4 may be in the form of bow and arrow. Is it clear? So different similarities are there. I believe it is clear. So number of similarities, सिर्फ एक चीज में सिमिलैरिटी है, कम बोरोइंग हो सकती है. नंबर ऑफ थिंग्स आर मोर, दैट मीन्स दे आर मोर सिमिलर, more closer. Right? If the number of things, suppose two cultures shares hundreds of things, or two cultures shares just the two things, which shows more historical connection, right? But that may be a thing that 98 things were not needed in that culture, so they degenerated, right? You understand what I'm trying to say? So criteria of form, he added another dimension, that is geographical statistic. Third is Fritz Grabner. Grabner, historical connection, undoubtedly, right? ये यूज नहीं आना है बट पता होना चाहिए, राइट? अगला इंपॉर्टेंट है, फ्रिट्ज ग्रेबनर. Fritz Grebner was a museum curator in Germany who emerged as the main leader of the German school of diffusionism, emerged as the main leader of the German school of diffusionism. Grabner, do right? Grabner studied the culture circles of Oceania, he found six layers of culture circles in Oceania, that is Tasmanian culture, number one, Tasmanian culture. Number two, Australian boomerang culture. Boomerang, इंस्टाग्राम वाला पहले होता था ना, वो फेंक के मारते थे वापस आ जाता था, पकड़ लेते थे, है ना? इट्स लाइक थोर का हथौड़ा, राइट? सो बूमरैंग वो होता है जो आप फेंकोगे वापस आपके पास आ जाएगा, राइट? ओके, so Australian boomerang, it's a common term nowadays used in English language. Boomerang, that means आपने कुछ किया था और वापस आप पे आके लगा, राइट? बूमरैंग इफेक्ट भी बोलते हैं. नेक्स्ट, टोटेमिक हंटर कल्चर. थर्ड लेयर इज टोटेमिक हंटर कल्चर. 4, horticulturist culture. 5, Melanesian bow culture. Melanesian bow culture. 6, Polynesian culture, right? He basically reconstructed these 6 layers of culture in Oceania, and he presented this, do right? He presented this in a paper on 19th November 1904 at Berlin Society Berlin Society of Physical Anthropology, Ethnology and Prehistory, right? Berlin Society of Physical Anthropology, Ethnology and Prehistory. So 19th November 1904 is considered as the birth date of the Culture Crease School, right? This date is considered as the birth date of Culture Crease School or the School of German Diffusionism. इससे पहले वाला डेवलपमेंट था. Clear? That is why we talked about yesterday. I told you na that he is the real father and Father Wilhelm Schmidt was influenced from him. Right? That is why we were saying that he is the real father of German school of diffusionism, because he constructed the 6 layers somewhere in Oceania. Right? Tasmania आपको पता होगा, तो Tasmanian culture. Right? Boomerang culture, Australia में boomerang culture मिलता है. So these are the 6 different layers of cultures that he identified there. Right? How he will identify this? How to identify? Through field work. He went in the field and collected the historical facts in the field. And then he said these 2 cultures are connected. Right? So do right. He reconstructed these culture circles through field work, and by applying the method of criteria of form and criteria of quantity. Criteria of form and criteria of quantity. I believe you understand. Geographical statistic was named now as criteria of quantity. The criteria of form is borrowed from same. It is coming from Redzel itself. The same concept was used by Redzel. Forman Jadanke, he used the term, German term is Forman Jadanke, but वो मेरे लिए जरूरी नहीं है. Criteria of form, right? Frobenius used the concept geographical statistics, and the term was changed, that I'm saying criteria of quantity. So criteria of quantity and geographical statistic is one and the same. Okay? Okay. Now how he explains this? He basically explained the same thing कि कैसा ये 6 layers बना, right? That means how this historical development might have occurred. So for that he explains. So his explanation. His explanation. According to him, early men invented the basic of culture. Early men invented the basic of culture, that is language and tools. Early men developed language and tools, right? This early men form 4-5 bands bands. You understand bands? Band is the group of people, right? It's a kind of political group. राइट. बैंड मीन्स जिसकी पॉपुलेशन कितनी होती है 30 to 100, राइट. अप्रोक्सीमेट पॉपुलेशन इतनी होती है. एक ग्रुप में ये आइसोलेट कर गए, राइट. दे फॉर्म्ड 4-5 बैंड्स एंड बिकम आइसोलेटेड इन different directions. So do right. The early men invented this. Soon they formed number of bands, 4-5 bands, and isolated. These early bands form their own culture, primeval culture. These early bands form their own culture, primeval मतलब सबसे पहले का culture, primeval culture. This primeval culture spread. This primeval culture spread to other parts through natural diffusion. Through natural diffusion, right. And from other parts, the cultural traits of primeval culture, from other parts the cultural traits of primeval culture spread to other parts through secondary diffusion. Right. Right. So he basically says this diffusion, natural diffusion, was the primary diffusion, which was natural, and when these traits spread from these areas to another areas, that becomes the secondary diffusion. So what he says, that the Polynesian culture is the latest one and the Tasmanian culture was the earliest one, right. So Tasmanian culture से जब traits spread हुए, that was primary or natural diffusion. When these traits of the Tasmanian culture spread from the Australian culture to the other cultures, that was secondary diffusion. Clear? What is primary and what is secondary diffusion? Clear ना? Primary diffusion means जो early primeval band था, उसका जो culture था जो spread हुआ, that was the primary or natural diffusion. When the cultural traits spread to other areas, it was secondary diffusion. That was his idea, right. So his idea is basically that he reconstructed the cultural circles. Okay. Now last scholar we have is Smith, Father Smith. Father Wilhelm Smith was the follower of Father Wilhelm Smith was the follower of Grabner, although he did not agree that Tasmanian culture is the earliest one because according to him African pygmy culture was the earliest one. African pygmy. According to him, African pygmy culture was the earliest one. he reconstructed the culture circles of the entire world and categorized them into four. Primitive culture circle, primary, secondary, and tertiary. He categorized them into primary, secondary, and tertiary in his book Culture Historical Method of Ethnology. Culture Historical Method of Ethnology. Done? Now, let's write about this school now. हाँ, एक और भी इनका काम था, इन्होंने कुछ नहीं किया, जो मैथडोलॉजी यूज किया था बाकियों ने, इन्होंने उनका नाम फिर से बदल दिया. ठीक है, इन्होंने क्राइटेरिया ऑफ क्वालिटी और क्वांटिटी कर दिया. जो क्राइटेरिया ऑफ फॉर्म चले आ रहा था, 3 लोग एग्री कर गए, ये नहीं कहता नहीं मैं नहीं मानूंगा, मैं क्राइटेरिया ऑफ क्वांटिटी लिखूंगा. राइट, क्राइटेरिया ऑफ क्वालिटी. So he says criteria of quality instead of form and criteria of quantity. That is same. The history of criteria of quality is that it was started with criteria of form of red gel. Right? The history of criteria of quantity is that it started as geographical statistic. Frobenius. ठीक है, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, आप किसी में कुछ भी लिख देना. जर्मन में लिखा हुआ था उनका, ठीक है, सब चलेगा. इंटरप्रिटेशन में सब चलेगा. ठीक है, सो आप उसको क्वांटिटी लिखो, क्वालिटी लिखो, जर्मन का इंग्लिश इंटरप्रिटेशन कुछ भी हो सकता है. ठीक है, सो यू आर सेफ इन दैट मैटर. ठीक है, नाउ what we are going to write now, we are going to write a summary that if they ask you a question, culture crease school or culture circle school, write a short note on that. Right? So do write culture circle school culture crease or culture circle school was developed by German diffusionists such as red gel, बाकियों को इज्जत, अब ग्रेबनर ले आओ. रेडजल, ग्रेबनर, स्मिथ एंड फ्रोबिनियस. दादाजी को इज्जत दे दिया हमने, बट ग्रेबनर इज द एक्चुअल फादर. राइट, फ्रोबिनियस, वी हैव शिफ्टेड फ्रोबिनियस टू द लास्ट. राइट, पर्पसफुली, बिकॉज मोस्ट इंपोर्टेंट पर्सन आर द टू, Grabner and Smith. Redgel was the real influencer. So दादाजी को हमने रख लिया, पिताजी को पीछे कर दिया थोड़ा सा. Right? That means Frobenius को हम थोड़ा पीछे लेके आ गए, because Frobenius and Grabner are contemporaries. Right? Done? So this is developed by these scholars. The German school was considered superior from the British school in terms of methodology and outlook, right? Culture Crease School, next paragraph, Culture Crease School attributed the development of culture not to one particular place, not to one particular place, but several places and in different times. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ में लिख लो, जर्मन डिफ्यूजनेस बिलीव that culture originated at several places from where it diffused to other parts of the world, through migration. If the question is 20 marker, you write everything that I have written, we have given. Otherwise the last paragraph. ऊपर वाला सबसे पहले नाम ले लेना चारों के, और this paragraph that I have given, this is the most important one. Right? Mark the last paragraph that you have written, just one last line. Right? That we say that at different times. ठीक है? This is the line that you have to write. If needed, सारा भी लिख दोगे. If not needed, this one line is necessary along with the names of the scholars. Right? Okay. किसके against में आया ये? Do right. So it was a reaction against, heading डाल दो, reaction against it was a reaction against the classical evolutionists and their ideas of psychic unity, progress, etc. Psychic unity, progress, etc. ठीक है. Influences, next heading, influences. Culture District School, this is also known as Culture District School. Culture District School, I have to use these words, otherwise you will not be able to connect. Suppose उन्होंने Culture District लिख दिया तो भूल जाओगे, है ना? So Culture Circle भी बोला जा सकता है, Culture District भी बोला जा सकता है, Culture Crease भी बोला जा सकता है. Clear? Okay. Influence from German Museum methodology. German Museum methodology. German Museum. It was influenced from German Museum methodology, comma, the ideas of Bastian, J.J. Bachofen, याद है evolutionism में J.J. Bachofen, B.A. CHO बचो, बच्चों, फेन, ठीक है। JJ बचो फेन, राइट। इवन रेड जेल, अगर रेड जेल को वो नील मांगे तो रेड जेल, ठीक है। ओके, बेसिक फीचर्स। Number one, people are primarily uninventive. People are primarily uninventive. And they imitate more from one another. Second, cultural traits originate at few places and migrated to others in form of circles or ripples in water. Circles or ripples in water. First, do one thing, make this kind of diagram. Right? It is like ripples in water. Secondly, you will say, who is saying so? That primeval culture and then बोल रहा है ना ग्रैबनर, वो वाला भी लिखो फिर, राइट। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अकॉर्डिंग टू ग्रैबनर, Oceanian cultures, Oceanian culture circles such as Tasmanian culture, Australian boomerang culture, etc., developed from early primeval culture. Next point. Not only single cultural traits, but the entire cultural complex is transplanted due to migration. Right? Next point. Cultural traits degenerate or diluted in course of diffusion. In bracket you write, according to Red Gel, they make their own adaptations. According to Redgel, cultural traits make their own adaptation. ठीक है, डन. नाउ एक और पॉइंट लिख दो, दैट फादर स्मिथ, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, फादर स्मिथ reconstructed 4 culture circles in the world, that is primitive, primary, secondary and tertiary. लिख लो उनको, पॉइंट वाइज लिख दो. प्रिमिटिव कल्चर सर्कल, ठीक है. नेक्स्ट टर्सरी, 4 ही है ना. सो प्रिमिटिव से शुरू करोगे, प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी, टर्सरी. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, द कल्चरल ट्रेट्स diffuse through primary and secondary diffusion. Diffuse through primary and secondary diffusion. Clear? Next, methods. Historical method. Historical method. Number 2, field work. Number 3, criteria of form. Criteria of form को explain कर दो. Similarity in bow and arrow. Bow and arrow design in Indonesia and Africa. Next is criteria of quantity. Criteria of quantity. Similarity in number of cultural traits. Number of cultural traits. For example, bow and arrow, housing design, shield, तलवार वाला shield, masks, myths between Africa and Indonesia. Right? ठीक है. Significance of this school. What are the merits? Number 1, using culture crease methods, it is possible to reconstruct the cultural history of the mankind. Cultural history of the mankind. Second, this can be useful, this school can be useful in understanding the migration of people and cultural traits ठीक है critique the idea that culture originated from 4-5 early bands in bracket लिख लो Grabner in bracket Grabner is flawed. Second, the scholarly sounding criteria of quality and criteria of quantity did not always yield realistic results. Next, they emphasized too much on material culture and largely ignored the non-material dimension of the culture. Don't think कि उन्होंने myths की तो बात की है ना, because largely they were archaeologists, and archaeologists basically see the facts that are present on the surface. Through that they were explaining everything, right? That this is their subsistence practice, this kind of bow and arrow they are using. So mainly they are using these things, right? कुछ चीजों में तो explain किया, but वो realistic नहीं था, right? Main उनका emphasis material culture था. Next point. Their approach is considered as barren and it lack detail. Their main emphasis was on typology rather than explaining diffusion. Right? Rather than diffusion, because they were influenced from museum methodology. म्यूजियम में क्या करता है, टाइपोलॉजी है ना, क्लासिफाई करना है, ये यहाँ रखना है, ये यहाँ पे रखना है, तो उनका काम उतना ही था. They did not, show the much interest that why diffusion had taken place, how diffusion have occurred. They did not explain that much in detail, right? So these are few critiques. इसके बाद तो क्या ही करोगे इनको और criticize. हाँ, uninventiveness बहुत सारे हो जाएंगे, बट ठीक है, अब 2-3 से ज्यादा लिखना मत, उतना बहुत रहता है क्रिटिसिज्म. मेन हमारा कंपोनेंट जो होना चाहिए वो सैलिएंट फीचर्स पे फोकस, मेथोडोलॉजी पे फोकस, और स्कॉलर्स कौन था फोकस, राइट? क्यों आया, किसके अगेंस्ट में आया, See, every idea emerged against some existing idea, right? Every idea is inspired from some idea. Every idea try to explain something, right? Using some methods, right? It contributes something, and yes, every idea have some deficiencies also, right? Despite deficiencies, it helped us to understand the dynamics of culture, isn't it? Dynamics of culture means the change aspect in culture, isn't it? It helped us to understand the dynamics of culture. So, do right, that can be the conclusion, right? Despite its limitations, it helped us to understand the dynamics of culture. Next is the American School of Diffusionism. American School of Diffusionism is also known as Culture Area School. This is also known as Culture Area School. What is culture area? Let me explain few points, then we'll proceed in this. Any question from last this school? अगर क्वेश्चन आएगा तो ये लास्ट में जो हमने लिखा यही है, उससे पहले जो भी था सिर्फ बेस बिल्डिंग एक्सरसाइज थी, ठीक है? वो कोई नहीं पूछने वाला कि किसने क्या किया, बट आपको समझ होगी तो दो लाइनें फालतू आपको समझ में आ गई होंगी, राइट? दैट इज व्हाट आवर पर्पस इज. सी सम टाइम वी आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर द रेनी डे ऑल्सो. अभी तक नहीं हो रहा है, बट अगर उन्होंने पूछना शुरू कर दिया तो कहाँ जाओगे, राइट? मुझसे बोलो, इससे अच्छा मैं पहले ही करवा के रखूं, राइट? सो लास्ट वाला पोर्शन ही इंपॉर्टेंट है. अभी तक ऐसा हुआ नहीं कि वाई पीपल डोंट आस्क, दैट इज देयर इज अ रीजन, क्योंकि ये इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, ये डिफंक्ट स्कूल है, इसकी रियली में कोई वैल्यू नहीं है, इसीलिए नहीं पूछते हैं, ठीक है? अमेरिकन डिफ्यूजनिज्म इज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट. If they ask you Vienna School of Diffusionism, that is same as German Diffusionism, because उस टाइम पे ऑस्ट्रो जर्मन एम्पायर था, ठीक है? और वियना में कॉन्फ्रेंस हुआ था एक बार, जो कि फादर स्मिथ उसमें चेयरमैन बना दिए गए थे, प्रेसिडेंट बना दिए गए थे, राइट? दैट इज व्हाई समटाइम दिस स्कूल इज आल्सो कॉल्ड एज वियना स्कूल. तो एक लिख लो अगर इनकेस जरूरत पड़ जाए तो. जर्मन स्कूल, वियना स्कूल, कल्चर क्रीज स्कूल, कल्चर डिस्ट्रिक्ट स्कूल, कल्चर सर्कल स्कूल, सारे एक ही नाम है. समझ में आ गया? जर्मन, ऑस्ट्रो जर्मन, वियना, कल्चर क्रीज, कल्चर डिस्ट्रिक्ट, कल्चर सर्कल, सभी एक ही नाम है. ऑल आर रेफरिंग टू द सेम थिंग. अगेन आई एम सेइंग जर्मन, ऑस्ट्रो जर्मन, वियना, कल्चर क्रीज, कल्चर सर्कल, कल्चर डिस्ट्रिक्ट, सभी एक ही को रेफर कर रहे हैं. सो जर्मन डिफ्यूजनिज्म बोवास आ रहे हैं, राइट? सो अमेरिकन डिफ्यूजनिज्म, okay? Franz Boas is the link between the German diffusionism and American diffusionism. Franz Boas, while he was in Germany, he worked as an assistant curator under Adolf Bastian when he was the director of the Royal Museum of Berlin. ठीक है, when he was the director, so he was assistant curator under him. Okay, so he learned the museum methodology of Germany. When he went to America, he was employed by the Chicago Museum or you may say the Field Museum, right? Chicago or Field Museum, and later on by American Museum for Natural History. American Museum for Natural History. He was employed there, right? So whatever he learnt here, he tested that there. Okay? While he was working in American Museum for Natural History, he basically arranged the artifacts of the American Indians based on geographical areas. समझ में आया? Basically what he did while he was employed here and here, both places, he arranged the artifacts of the American Indians on the basis of geographical areas. Okay? And Clark Whistler was working with him there, fortunately. Right? Clark Whistler was working with him. He became interested. कि तो नया आइडिया लेके आए और नया आइडिया कोई भी लेके आएगा बाहर का इंसान तो नेचुरली यू गेट इंस्पायर्ड दैट वाओ बाबा आपने अच्छा रास्ता दिखाया मुझे है ना बाबा ने भी बोल दिया कि स्वाहा चलो तुम्हारा कुछ भला हुआ सो क्लार्क विस्लर का वहां से इंटरेस्ट जागा दैट वी मस्ट सी राइट वी मस्ट ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ डिफ्यूजन माइट हैव अकर्ड. Okay, so what is there? This school, American School of Diffusionism, this school is also called as Culture Area School. This school is also known as Culture Area School. What is culture area? Let's understand. What is culture? I believe all of you have a little idea. It is the shared behavior, right? It is a shared behavior of a group, isn't it? It is the ideas that are held in common by a group. We can say so. The collection of the habits, beliefs, practices, customs, traditions held in common by a group is a culture. है ना कह देते ना इंडियन कल्चर राजस्थानी कल्चर रंग बिरंगा कल्चर कलरफुल कल्चर ऑफ राजस्थान राइट सो बेसिकली व्हाट इज कल्चर द आइडियाज दैट आर हेल्ड इन कॉमन बाय अ ग्रुप द प्रैक्टिसेस देयर ट्रेडिशंस देयर कस्टम्स देयर क्लोथिंग एवरीथिंग दैट इज they are following that is their culture. Okay, that culture is not in the air I believe. कहीं पे तो रखा हुआ है ना लोगों के अंदर लोग तो जगह पे रहते हैं ज्योग्राफी में रहते हैं सो द एरिया वेयर द कल्चर इज लोकेटेड दैट इज द कल्चर एरिया राइट सो कल्चर एरिया may be simply defined as a geographical area where homogeneity of cultural phenomena homogeneity of cultural phenomena is observed. Homogeneity of cultural phenomena is observed. That is culture area. ठीक है. Homogeneity of cultural phenomena means same type की cultural phenomena. Cultural phenomena here means same kind of food, clothing, beliefs, norms, values, customs, right? ठीक है. That represent the cultural phenomena. So अगर सेम तरह की कल्चरल फिनोमिना पाया जाएगा वो एक कल्चर एरिया होगा. राइट. So what he did, what Boas did, he basically placed or positioned the artifacts of one culture area, say in this shelf, right? And this is area 1, this is area 2, and this is area 3. When he positioned the cultural items from one area here, one area here, one area here, on the basis of the geographical closeness. So what he found, what he and other followers of the culture area school found, that the cultural traits of area 1 and area 2 are similar, more similar than culture A and 3. Right? The cultural traits of these two cultures are more similar than this one and this one. वो तो obvious है, because people living nearby, they will share more, they will exchange more. है ना. कौन सा रॉकेट साइंस है, यही बोला इन्होंने. सिर्फ सिंपल यही आइडिया है. दैट इज व्हाट कल्चर एरिया स्कूल इज ऑल अबाउट. इसी को लिखना है. ठीक है. अब इसमें कुछ और आइडियाज, बिकॉज लिखना है तो कुछ और भी लिखना पड़ेगा. हाउ वी कैन रिकंस्ट्रक्ट द कल्चरल एरियाज. कैसे बनाओगे कल्चर एरिया स्पेस पे. मान लिया कि आपने मैप ले लिया, कौन सा एरिया कहां पे लोकेटेड है, कैसे बनाओगे. दैट देयर इन दिस पार्टिकुलर एरिया देयर इज होमोजेनिटी ऑफ कल्चरल फिनोमिना. हाउ विल यू कंस्ट्रक्ट दैट. दैट्स अ टफ टास्क. हाउ टू डू दैट. बाय गोइंग इनटू द फील्ड, कलेक्टिंग डेटा. फील्ड वर्क करना पड़ेगा ना. दैट मीन्स you have to enlist all the cultural traits. Whistler gave a dictum, because Boas के स्टूडेंट थे और Boas तो फील्ड वर्क में बिलीव करने वाला इंसान था. He says go to the field and collect all the datas. Unless the data is sufficient, you cannot give theories. If the data is sufficient, theories will spontaneously emerge out of the data. You don't need to make efforts to make theories. That is what the idea of Boas was. अब Whistler भी influence तो था ही. Right? He says that culture cannot be fully comprehended. Whistler make this argument. Culture cannot be fully comprehended unless the list of cultural traits approaches completeness. Understood? You are not listening. That is why I have to pardon. So basically what Boas says that collect all kind of data. That was the idea of, right? Boas inspired Whistler, right? Whistler को भी, अब स्टूडेंट को इतना तो सुन के आपको भी फर्क तो पड़ ही जाता है ना, कि सर बोल रहे हैं, सिर्फ बोल ही नहीं रहा है ना बंदा, कुछ तो लॉजिकल बातें कर ही रहा होगा. तो somehow I inspire you, right? So Whistler says that a culture cannot be fully comprehended unless the list of cultural traits approach completeness. ठीक है. मतलब लिस्ट जब पूरी हो जाएगी तभी हम पूरी तरह समझ पाएंगे. इस बात को लेके क्रोबर बैठ गया, बोला लिस्ट तो कभी पूरी होनी ही नहीं है, राइट? और कल्चर समझा जाना नहीं है. दैट मीन्स क्यों करें, है ना. सो बेसिकली लिस्ट पूरी होना और कल्चर समझा जाए ना, बट कोशिश तो करी जाएगी. दे कलेक्टेड thousands of cultural traits, started with food areas, because food is the most basic denominator to understand a culture. So they started with a basic denominator, that is food, and they started collecting all type of cultural data, right? And that is how initially Whistler demarcated 10 areas in North America, 3 areas in South America, and 1 in Latin America, 14 areas. Later on, he thought, itna sara to kaun padega? Then he summarized them into 6 in North America, 6 areas in North America, like Caribou area in the Arctic. Salmon is a fish that is found in Northwest Pacific coast, salmon area. Bison area in the plains, right? Wild seed area in the Californian region. Intensive agriculture in southeast and southwest of America. And eastern maize region, जहाँ पे आपको पता है ना ये सारा जो पॉपकॉर्न सब चल रहा है आपका, वो वहीं से आता है. Eastern region of southeastern region of the America. Your geography background, so आपको पता है सब. So ये 6 areas उन्होंने demarcate किया, right? So ये 6 area, then he says further, Whistler says that culture areas, इन्होंने 6 areas को identify किया North America में, 6 culture areas. I will be giving you dictation about all, don't worry, right? Just समझने की कोशिश करो, visualize करो कहाँ पे क्या आ रहा है. सबसे पहले north की side देखो, Arctic पे, Caribou, reindeers, reindeer ही खाते हैं वहाँ पे लोग, right? Northwest Pacific coast, Canada वाला coast, Pacific coast, वहाँ पे salmon एक fish है वो काफी मिलती है, तो वो लोग salmon खाते हैं mainly, salmon पे subsist करते हैं, like Kwakiutl, Haida, and these many tribes are living there. They subsist on salmon. उसके नीचे आ जाओ, California is a state, big state. There people mainly rely on the wild seeds. Central Plains, plains में आपने देखा वो बाइसन दौड़ते हुए, वो भैंसे बड़े बड़े, right? So बाइसन खाते हैं वहाँ पे लोग, right? मिसौरी, मिसिसिपी रीजन जो है वहाँ पे बाइसन को खाते हैं लोग, right? You go a little bit eastern side, maize, जहाँ पे जो tropical वाला एरिया है, जहाँ पे cotton cultivation होता है, थोड़ा सा maize cultivation होता है, थोड़ा hot climate वाला है, फ्लोरिडा के आसपास वाला, right? So eastern maize is cultivated there, so people subsist on that. They are basically cattle subsist on that and they eat everything. वो भी खा लेते हैं और pigs को भी खा लेते हैं, ठीक है? So उसके बाद हमारा बच जाता है साउथ वाला, साउथ ईस्ट एंड साउथ वेस्ट वाला थोड़ा सा रीजन, राइट? देयर पीपल रिलाई ऑन इंटेंसिव एग्रीकल्चर. So these are 6 areas that he identified, right? He further says that every culture area have a culture center. Every culture area have a culture center. This is not the way a culture area look like. This is a hypothetical assumption. We cannot make that clean boundaries of any culture. But for understanding, this is the culture area and this is the culture center. Culture center is the earliest settlement center of this culture area, right? That means people settled earliest in this area. That is why it is center of it. ये मैंने बीच में बनाने की कोशिश किया, बट जरूरी नहीं है, वो हो सकता है शायद यहाँ पे हो. The purpose is not about the geographical center, rather it is the area of earliest settlement. Is it clear? Is it clear? There are traits that spread around the culture center. Say this is one cultural trait that is spreading around the culture center, and this is the another culture trait that spread around the culture center. These are the 2 different traits that are spreaded around the culture center. The trait that is spreading in more area around the culture center, it has more historical depth, it is older. Which trait is older? The green one is older because it is spreading in more area around culture center. The yellow one is spreading in a very small area. ठीक है, all well here? ठीक हो सब? अच्छा, ध्यान रखो, काफी देर से परेशान हो रहे हो तुम, है ना? दवाई ले लेना. चलो, ऑल द बेस्ट. ध्यान रखा करो, शरीर अगर बीमार है तो कोई बात नहीं, यू कैन टेक रेस्ट, है ना? मैं यहीं पे हूँ, कहीं नहीं जा रहा हूँ. क्योंकि कोई बार होता है कि जैसे कि हमारे 2-3 फ्रेंड्स, एक और फ्रेंड एडमिट हुआ था, 2-3 फ्रेंड्स जो शायद आप भी परेशान थे, है ना? तो हेल्थ इज इम्पोर्टेंट. हम कहीं नहीं जा रहे हैं, हम यहीं हैं. ठीक है, अगर आप बाद में भी कहोगे तो मैं बाद में समझा दूंगा, बट हेल्थ को मत कॉम्प्रोमाइज करना कभी. ये परेशान है क्या? अच्छा, ठीक है. अच्छा, वैसे लग रहा है. ठीक है. सो this green one, because it is spreading in the larger area around the center, this is older. So he added another concept of age area. Culture area, age area. Age area represent the time dimension of the cultural traits. ठीक है, समझ में आया? So what are the concepts he gave? He gave the concept of culture area. He gave the concept of culture center, and he gave the concept of age area. Okay, these are the ideas given by our Whistler. ठीक है, अब क्या हुआ, कुछ चीजों से एक और स्कॉलर आते हैं इन्हीं में, Alfred Kroeber. Alfred Kroeber was not very happy with the ideas of Whistler. So he says that Whistler ठीक कह रहा है कुछ कुछ चीजों में, but I want some changes. Otherwise मुझे कौन पूछेगा? So क्रोबर ने अपने चेंजेस दे दिए. क्या क्या चेंजेस दे दिए? बोला कि जो कल्चर सेंटर का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, दिस इज नॉट, यू कैन से डायनेमिक, इट इज विदाउट हिस्टोरिकल डेप्थ. हिस्टोरिकल डेप्थ नहीं है इसमें, राइट? सो ही सेज, he replaced the term culture center with culture climax. Culture climax is the dynamic equivalent of culture center, right? It is the area of above average development. It is the dynamic equivalent of culture center. It is the area of above average development where the cultural pattern is more clearly visible. The pattern of the culture is more clearly visible, right? And when we move from the culture climax to outside, we see the intensity of the cultural traits decrease. So he added another dimension here, the dimension of cultural intensity. What he say? The intensity of cultural traits is more in the cultural climax. ठीक है? And when you move away from the climax area, you see decline in the intensity. ठीक है? क्योंकि दूर जाते जाते जा रहे हो तो वो पैटर्न इतना क्लियरली विजिबल नहीं होगा. ठीक है? बिल्कुल क्लियर कट पैटर्न कहां देखोगे? क्लाइमेक्स में. इट इज द एरिया ऑफ above average development, and this development had taken place in course of history, in course of time. ठीक है? So it is the oldest area. ठीक है? From where all cultural traits spread to the outside. ठीक है? When they spread to the outside, the intensity of the traits decreased. So these are the concepts that they developed. ठीक है? So again I can explain. Culture area, that is the geographical area where homogeneous culture is found. Homogeneous culture is found. That is the, what we say, culture area. According to Whistler, culture area have a culture center, which is the area of earliest settlement, where all cultural traits originated and spread in all directions in the culture area. Right? This culture area, or you can say some traits which were originated earlier, they spread in a larger area around culture center, and that shows the historical depth. That is the idea of age area of that trait. ठीक है, एज एरिया क्या है कि कितनी दूरी में फैला हुआ है एक कल्चर ट्रेट. ओके, सो दिस इज द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ एज एरिया. ओके, the Krober was not very happy with the ideas of Whistler, right? He said yes, culture areas तो ठीक है, but कुछ कुछ ideas हमें add करने पड़ेंगे, because Whistler's ideas lack historical depth, especially the idea of culture center. So he replaced the idea of culture center with culture climax. What is culture climax? Culture climax is the dynamic equivalent of culture center. Right? It is the area of above average development, where the pattern of culture is clearly visible. Pattern of culture is clearly visible, and when we move from this central area, or you can say the culture climax, we see the decrease in the intensity of cultural traits. Clear? So he added the another dimension, that is the dimension of culture intensity. ठीक है, अब बात आती है, बहुत ये वंडरफुल आइडिया है, अनडाउटेबली इट्स अ वंडरफुल आइडिया, बट टुडे यू हैव ड्रॉन culture area and you say this is the culture area. Tomorrow through more field work you find out more and more cultural traits, then you have to adjust the culture area. Tomorrow you have collect more traits, then you have to again adjust the culture area. Don't you see the idea is static? It is the static idea made by the anthropologist. It hardly represents the actual reality. It may or may not represent the actual reality because I cannot be able to collect all the traits. कितना भी मेहनत कर लूं, राइट? सो पहला एक तो एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट ने अपनी खुशी के लिए बना दिया. सेकंड, बनाने के बाद ये आइडिया स्टैटिक हो गया. कल को मान लिया कि कोई और कल्चरल ट्रेट इधर से उधर आ गया, तो आई हैव टू रीएडजस्ट इट अगेन, क्योंकि डिफ्यूजन तो होता रहेगा ना. सो दैट इज द बेसिक फ्लो इन दिस आइडिया. ठीक है, बेसिक फ्लो क्या है? नाउ दे आर डिफेंडिंग इट. नाउ दे से हम कौन सा कह रहे हैं कि ये है. वी एग्री विद दीज क्रिटिसिजम्स. कल्चर एरिया इज अ ह्यूरिस्टिक डिवाइस. इट्स अ एक्सप्लेनेटरी टूल to explain diffusion. It's not a theory at all. So why you are criticizing us? Right? This is what the culture area school is. This is what American school of diffusionism is. Clear? I believe समझ में आया होगा. They are talking about culture area. What is culture area? Culture area is the geographical area where culture is homogeneous. Right? Culture area, according to Whistler, have a culture center. Culture center is the area of early settlement where cultural traits originated and spread outside in form on all directions. Right? He added another dimension, that is age area, to represent the time dimension. Right? If a cultural trait is spreading in the more area around the culture center, that is the older trait than the trait which is spreading in the less area. Right? These ideas were good, but Krober says I will add something new. So he added the dimension of culture climax and culture intensity. Right? Now let us see it graphically. This is one culture area. This is another culture area that is locating side by side. This is the center of this is the center of this. Since Whistler says सब जगह फैलेंगे, Right. Yes, dear. Which one is the oldest trait? Red one, green one is the oldest trait. Clear? And the blue one is the latest trait. Right? And that is how, see what happens when the cultural trait move around the cultural area, right? Their intensity, or you can say they will reduce here when they reach in the marginal areas. These are the marginal areas. Marginal areas are those areas where the cultural traits of the other areas or other culture centers start emanating. ये marginal area because this cultural trait start emanating here. समझ में आ गया what is marginal area? कोई कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है मार्जिनल एरिया का, समझने की बात है. मार्जिनल एरिया रिप्रेजेंट द मार्जिनल साइड्स ऑफ द कल्चर एरिया वेयर द कल्चरल ट्रेड्स फ्रॉम अदर कल्चर सेंटर्स स्टार्ट एमिनेटिंग या दिखना शुरू हो जाएं. बस यही है पूरा कल्चर एरिया स्कूल. राइट? कैन वी राइट दिस? लेट्स राइट. American School of Diffusionism is also known as culture area school. American School of Diffusionism is represented by Boas, Clark, Whistler, and Alfred Kroeber. American School of Diffusionism rejected the ideas of classical evolutionists because of use of secondary data, ethnocentrism, conjecture, and they rectified some of the shortcomings of German School of Diffusionism. German School of Diffusionism. Right. German School of Diffusionism cannot explain why diffusion had occurred. They cannot explain this thing. Why diffusion had occurred. American School ने पता क्या बोला? Sometime it is easy to borrow. Right? Then invent. That is why. Simple. Right? बहुत simple answer दे दिया उन्होंने. उन्होंने बोला ही नहीं कुछ. बोल देते. इतना ही तो बात थी. बस आंसर खत्म हो जाता, थोड़ा सा और ऑथेंटिक हो जाता, बट ठीक है, दे रेक्टिफाइड देम, राइट? नाउ इन्फ्लुएंसेस. American school of diffusionism was influenced from the German diffusionists, right? They were influenced from the museum methodology of Germany, also they were influenced from the ethnographic fieldwork approach of Franz Boas and his mentor Adolf Bastian. Adolf Bastian. Salient features: the American school of diffusionism used culture area as an explanatory tool to explain diffusion. To explain diffusion. Culture area is a geographically contiguous region where homogeneity of cultural phenomena is found. Homogeneity of cultural phenomena is found. According to Whistler, who developed the concept of culture area, right? In bracket लिखो. He borrowed this from O.T. Mason. इसने डेवलप किया. ओरिजिनली जो कल्चर एरिया कॉन्सेप्ट इनसे पहले O.T. मैसन ने यूज कर दिया था, तो इसने बोरो किया था वहां से टर्म, राइट? अकॉर्डिंग टू विस्लर, हु डेवलप्ड द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ कल्चर एरिया. कल्चर एरिया कोमा करके लिखो. कल्चर एरिया consists of culture center and marginal areas. Culture center is the area of early settlement where all cultural traits originated and spread to the rest of the culture area and other culture areas in course of history. Right, next point. He added the historical dimension to the concept of culture area through the idea of age area. Right, if डैश करके लिखो, if डैश करके लिखो आगे, if a cultural trait spread in more area around the culture center than the other traits, then the former was a older trait. Then the former was a older trait. Right? फॉर्मर मतलब पुराने वाला, जो हमने पहले बात किया वो फॉर्मर वाला, हमने बोला ना कि एक ट्रेट, तो उसको हमने फॉर्मर कर दिया बात करते टाइम. ठीक है, ओके. अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, अकॉर्डिंग टू विस्लर, diffusion of cultural traits is a continuous process is a complex process, and diffusion is more prevalent in culture areas located nearby. ठीक है, located nearby. ये दिखा दो, ये डायग्राम बना दो, इसमें सब कुछ लिख दो, कल्चर एरिया, कल्चर सेंटर, डिफ्यूजन. राइट, this represent the culture center, this represent the culture area, this represent the marginal areas, okay. डन हो जाएगा. ओके, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. विस्लर demarcated 6 culture areas in North America on the basis of food as the basic denominator. Second is the Northwest Pacific Coast, salmon. 3, we have Great Plains, bison, right? Then California, wild seed, right? Next, eastern woodland, maize, and the sixth one is southwest and southeast, right? Here intensive agriculture. These are the 6 areas he next. Alfred Kroeber modified the idea of Clark Whistler by adding the idea of culture climax and cultural intensity. According to him, the concept of culture center is without historical depth. Without historical depth. ठीक है? Culture climax is the dynamic equivalent of cultural center It is the area of above average development development from which the cultural stimuli follow cultural stimuli follow decreasing cultural intensity. Culture climax is that part of culture area where numerous elements or cultural traits are more sharply expressed and the interrelated pattern is visible. Interrelated pattern is visible. Clear? Okay, this is the idea of culture area. Now, methods. हाँ, इंटर रिलेटेड पैटर्न, जो उनके बीच में पैटर्न है वो ज्यादा क्लियरली दिखेगा वहां पे, और जैसे जैसे दूर जाओगे वो पैटर्न थोड़ा सा धुंधला होता चला जाएगा. क्लियर? दैट पैटर्न इज मोर शार्पली एक्सप्रेस्ड इन द culture climax, right? Because it is the area of above average development. That means, suppose you want to see caste system में जजमानी सिस्टम, कुछ कोर एरियाज हैं जहां पे आपको क्लियरली दिखेगा. सपोज हरियाणा में जाते हो आप जींद चले जाओ, जींद में आपको हरियाणा की प्योर वाली भाषा सुनाई देगी, जो बिल्कुल जो लठमार भाषा होती है वो सुनाई देगी. जैसे जैसे वहां से दूर जाओगे, that you will not find that sharpness. I'm from Haryana, you won't find my language as some kind of very harsh kind of language, right? So basically, but if you go there, that portion have more sharply expressed pattern of this language, right? That is how he's saying, right? You may say you want to see Braj Bhasha, or this is this language that is spoken in many areas of Rajasthan, also the area of Agra and many areas, जो ब्रज वाली जो लैंग्वेज है. सो कुछ एरिया जहाँ पे बहुत शार्पली एक्सप्रेस मिलेगा और धीरे धीरे दूर जाओगे डाइल्यूशन होता चला जाएगा. क्लियर? सो दैट इज हाउ वी आर सेइंग. सो क्लियर? समझ में आ गया? मेथड्स, व्हाट आर द मेथड्स यूज्ड बाय देम. सो सबसे पहले तो बात, इन्होंने कल्चर एरिया मेथड ही है इनका, right? Culture area was used as an explanatory tool to explain diffusion. Culture area was used as a explanatory tool to explain diffusion. Second, they relied heavily on ethnographic fieldwork and collection of empirical data about material and non-material dimension of the culture, material and non-material dimension of the culture. राइट? समझ में आया? सिग्निफिकेंस नाउ. Number one, American School of Diffusionism gave impetus to fieldwork, impetus to fieldwork. Number two, they emphasized on cultural relativity, emphasized on cultural relativity. Limitations. Number one, the concept of culture area is static. Static. Second, it seems like culture areas are more in the mind of the anthropologist than they actually represent any culture area on the ground. Then they actually represent any culture area on the ground. Next, culture area scholars gave more emphasis to the material dimension than non-material dimension. Next, the idea of Whistler seems ethnocentric when he says that the people at the culture center are the inventors and rest are the followers. Rest are the followers. Despite weakness, this is the most logical school. Most logical school. Now, क्रोबर के बारे में थोड़ी सी बातें लिख लेते हैं. क्रोबर को हमने मिस कर दिया था. ठीक है, क्रोबर के बारे में, क्योंकि क्रोबर आपको बाद में काम आएगा बहुत. ठीक है, ये हमारा स्कूल था, ए एल क्रोबर। विस्लर हमारे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, इतना इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है वो बंदा, बस यही है कि वो बोवास का स्टूडेंट था इसीलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, ठीक है। बट क्रोबर इज रियल इंपॉर्टेंट। सो क्रोबर, क्रोबर और बोवास में भी सिमिलरिटी है, राइट। क्रोबर का भी डिसेंट जर्मनी से है, राइट। क्रोबर के फादर जो थे वो जर्मन थे, घर पे जर्मन चलती थी, राइट। और ये पैदा हुआ था न्यू जर्सी में, तो बाद में इसका तो पालन पोषण इंग्लिश के साथ हुआ, राइट। और फ्रांस बोवास हु वाज इन द कोलंबिया, फ्रांस बोवास बेसिकली वाज अ जर्मन, सो नेचुरली जर्मन जर्मन भाई भाई, सो वो इनके साथ हो गया, राइट। ही वाज एजुकेटेड, एल्फ्रेड क्रोबर वाज एजुकेटेड इन इंग्लिश लिटरेचर, मास्टर्स किया था इन्होंने इन इंग्लिश लिटरेचर। देन गलती से बोवास से टकरा गया। बोवास बोला क्या पागलपन कर रहे हो, इधर आओ मैं पढ़ाता हूँ तुम्हें रियल चीजें, राइट। सो he was inspired from him and then he pursued PhD under Franz Boas. He was the first PhD under Franz Boas. फ्रांस बोआस को लोग नहीं मिल रहे होंगे शुरुआत में नया नया टीचर था, जर्मन के साथ वैसे भी थोड़ी हॉस्टिलिटी थी, सो ये मिल गया तो चलो मैं तुम्हें बनाता हूँ। अब ऐसा बना दिया तो नेचुरली क्रोबर को ऐसा बना दिया कि क्रोबर को देख देख के लोग इसके पास फिर आने लगे। And we know that Franz Boas is the greatest scholar in the American history of anthropology, right? Papa Boas बन गए बाद में। So A.L. Kroeber, Alfred Kroeber, did masters in English literature and later on shifted to anthropology. Right? He was the first PhD under Franz Boas. His dissertation topic was Arapaho, Arapaho, Arapaho Indian decorative symbolism. Decorative symbolism. Right? After doing PhD, he joined University of California and retired from there in 1946. राइट अब कैलिफोर्निया में था तो उसके आसपास के जितने इंडियंस थे उनकी स्टडी की इन्होंने, राइट। सो ही स्टडीड द अमेरिकन इंडियंस ऑफ कैलिफोर्निया as well as the people like Juni Indians, Juni, Juni Indians, right. In 1911 there was a significant development. 1911 में एक बहुत सिग्निफिकेंट डिस्कवरी हुआ। क्या हुआ? वन पर्सन टोटली नेक्ड विदाउट एनी काइंड ऑफ क्लोथिंग एंड यू कैन से जंगली सा इंसान पकड़ा गया, कैलिफोर्निया में, right? So what happened, this man was the last Yahi. According to Kroeber, Yahi people were the indigenous people of the Americas, right? A starving man coming from jungles, and he was captured by police near a slaughterhouse where the animal slaughter take place. Maybe he was hungry and he had smelled flesh and he was roaming here and there just in search of food, right? Basically, Yahi people were exterminated by the industrialists, the miners, and the colonial powers. They were exterminated, they were killed, butchered by these industrialists, right? And this is considered as the last Yahi, right? Because it is a jungly, you can say so-called jungly, right? I'm not discriminating them, but yes, uncivilized man was captured, right? Some kind of, you know, at that time it becomes a हल्ला हो गया पूरे अमेरिका में कि ऐसा पकड़ा गया. पता लगते ही क्रोबर के तो कान खड़े हो गए कि काम में का चीज मिल गया, राइट? रिसोर्स मिल गया, स्पेसिमेन मिल गया, नाउ आई हैव टू स्टडी इट. एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट ऐसे ही इनह्यूमन लोग होते हैं, उनके लिए सब चीज रिसोर्स है, राइट? अभी कोई मुझे काम की बात करने लगेगा तो मैं भी उसको ये नहीं देखता हूँ कि इंसान बता रहा है, मैं ये देखता हूँ बात इंपॉर्टेंट है, राइट? समटाइम आई फील इट्स ए इनह्यूमन एटीट्यूड दैट आई एम नॉट रेस्पेक्टिंग द मैन एज मच एज रेस्पेक्टिंग दैट आइडिया, right? That I am trying to extract something from that person. I also feel the same thing. वो हो जाता है, पता नहीं क्यों हो जाता है, but that is the brutal truth somehow. So basically what he came to know about that person, that a person is captured. He went to the police and he asked for the release. He took the man along with him to California University, right? And there he and along with other scholars studied him. Edward Sapir, another scholar, another student of Boas, also studied. Edward Sapir was a linguist. He was a linguistic anthropologist. Language को study करना था, right? Now this Yahi man, Yahi is the name of the tribe, right? Yahi tribe में एक custom है that no one shall spell out his name. No one shall spell out his name. Nobody knew the Yahi language there, right? So in Yahi language, the man is known as Ishi, right? That is why he is known as Ishi. Okay? Now in this, on this man, Ishi, that is the last Yahi, there is a movie also, The Last of His Tribe. YouTube पे है, देख लेना, ठीक है? अगर मन करे तो देख सकते हो, The Last of His Tribe. ओके, क्लियर दिस मच? अभी मैं क्यों बता रहा हूँ, क्योंकि मैं ईशी को बाद में लेके आऊंगा जब हम पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म लास्ट थ्योरी करेंगे. एक्चुअली इसकी वाइफ ने इसके ऊपर बुक लिख दी बाद में, दैट ही वाज द लास्ट याही. अब क्या होता है कि कुछ सालों के बाद, 100 ईयर के अराउंड के बाद, क्योंकि 1911 में तो ये हुआ ही था, सो अराउंड 99 2000 के आसपास कुछ लोगों ने केस डाल दिया इनके ऊपर कि हमारा जो बंदा था वो तुमने बुरी कर रखा है, उसके मॉडल रिमेन्स वापस करो. अभी तक तो कह रहे थे ये लास्ट याही है ना? वाज ये लास्ट याही? दे वन द केस. They repatriated the remains and they buried again at their place. That means he was not the last Yahi. Other people were there, right? So that is how his or her work or the ideas of Kroeber somehow were belied. So how true are the anthropological accounts? We started questioning. How true are the anthropological accounts then? If one account is not true, how we can rely on them, right? So that is why we will क्वेश्चन दिस. ठीक है, ओके, आगे लिखो. हाँ, इन 1925, 1911 में यही हुआ था, एशी, राइट? 1911 क्रोबर met Ishi, the last person of Yahi tribe, last person of Yahi tribe. He studied Ishi along with other scholars such as Edward Sapir, right. In 1925, he published Handbook of Indians of California, Handbook of Indians of California, जो उन्होंने फील्ड वर्क किया था ना, उसी को पब्लिश कर दिया. 1939 he published Cultural and Natural Areas of Native North America, areas of Native North America. In 1944, he wrote Configuration of Cultural Growth, right. Next, other contributions. He expanded the ideas of historical particularism, cultural determinism, cultural relativism, etc. Right. Next point. According to him, culture is super organic and super individual. क्लियर. सुपर इंडिविजुअल मीन्स एक इंडिविजुअल की बस की बात नहीं है पूरा कल्चर बनाना, ठीक है, बट कल्चर हमें बना रहा है. कल्चरल डिटर्मिनिज्म यही कहता है ना, दैट कल्चर डिटरमिन्स व्हाट काइंड ऑफ पीपल यू आर. यू डिड नॉट क्रिएटेड कल्चर, कल्चर क्रिएटेड यू. ठीक है, आप कल्चर की देन हो. दैट इज व्हाट ही सेज. सुपर ऑर्गेनिक दैट मीन्स ऑर्गेनिज्म से ऊपर है, बायोलॉजी से ऊपर है. सुपर इंडिविजुअल मीन्स एक इंडिविजुअल से भी ऊपर है. सोसाइटी ने कल्चर बनाया, इंडिविजुअल ने नहीं बनाया. ठीक है, सोसाइटी हैव क्रिएटेड अ कल्चर. ही सेज दैट human society is unique because it have culture. Human society is a unique because it has culture. What differentiates human society from other animal societies is the presence of culture. See what he says, that society can be found among bees. ants, and other animals. What distinguishes human society? Human society is recognized, or you can say differentiated, by presence of culture. So according to him, culture is a unique attribute of human society. Culture is a unique attribute of human society. Clear? These are few ideas of his. Now, in your booklet, the comparison between all these schools are given. Not needed, although नहीं पूछा जाता है, but फिर भी पढ़ लेना. ठीक है? Comparison between American and German is given. The comparison between British and German is given, and British and American is given. Right? 3 tables may be present in your booklet. Do read them. Right? In the next session, we will talk about functionalism. Right? We have already covered 2 schools of thought, 3 schools ideally. One was classical evolutionism, other was historical particularism, and third is diffusionism. Diffusionism is the most underrated. Historical particularism is the most overrated. That means हर साल क्वेश्चन आता है वहां से. ठीक है? क्लासिकल इवोल्यूशनिज्म वो मन करता है तो की बात है. ठीक है? वो मन की बात है उनकी, आएगा तो आ जाएगा. ठीक है? ओके. सो ये दोनों जो स्कूल, तीनों स्कूल जो हमने किया, क्लासिकल इवोल्यूशनिज्म, historical particularism, and diffusionism, they were basically talking about the time dimension, what had happened in the past. Right? Now on we are shifting on another dimension, that we are not going in the history now. Functionalism will not dwell in history. We'll study here and now. Right? So there will be a paradigm shift in the thought from the historical dimension to the present context. Clear? So we'll move on to that in the next session. अभी वैसे भी टाइम हो गया है. चलो. So see you all on Monday. Those who have not covered, miss थे, जिनका भी मिस हुआ है तो 2 दिन में पूरा कर लो अपना. ठीक है? चलो. All the very best.